Okay, I also want to talk about feminism. So, the way this chapter is, there's one section that is basically going to cover like a huge swath of movements that we see in the 1960s from um, basically from like the anti-war movement to the environmental movement. There's a lot going on with feminism, though, and so that's why there's kind of a separate lecture. And feminism, we've kind of seen these waves growing. If you remember, the last time we kind of talked about it, we talked about the Feminine Mystique from Betty Friedan, which was published in '63, I believe, and we're going to see the feminism movement pick up a lot of speed in the late 60s into the 70s, and then by the time we get to the 80s, it is moving very quickly. So, first off, Kennedy in 1961, he creates this commission on the status of women. And what this was, it was a outlet for women to basically have a voice with the president, and kind of discussed women's roles within labor unions and organizations, and kind of talked about how women, first off, had pay inequality, discriminatory hiring practices against women, pretty much the types of issues that women dealt with in the workforce. And as stated, this was kind of an opportunity for them to be able to have the president's ear for a little bit and to kind of talk with him and address these problems with him. In 1966, Betty Friedan, who wrote The Feminine Mystique, and she is with a couple of other very important feminist characters. I'm trying to remember one of them. She's Christian Bale's stepmom, Gloria Steinem. She is one of the other women who's kind of at the head of this movement known as the National Organization for Women, otherwise known as NOW. And basically, as you can see here, it says it's a civil rights organization for women, and that's exactly what it was. It was a organization where women nationally could rally and organize and basically have conversations with each other, publish magazines. Um, I know Gloria Steinem was an editor for a very large magazine that came out of this organization. Um, and we're seeing also what this idea of radical feminism um, that emerges from this. And radical feminism argued not only about kind of, equality, but that things needed to go beyond equality, and that the status and the role of women should be elevated, um, and that potentially women could do things better than men could. And this differentiates itself from just normal feminism, which just advocates for kind of an equal playing field. And so Betty Friedan and Gloria Steinem, kind of leading now, are going to rally thousands of women across the country behind them. And this is, of course, coming right on the heels of what we talked about with the 1950s, with this, kind of subordinate role, the housewife cooking, cleaning, being there when the husband comes home. Remember, we looked at the Good Housewife guide, don't ask him questions, blah, blah, blah. And so this is a reaction to all of this. And of course, I mean, it's moving incredibly far left, this reaction is. There's Betty Friedan meeting with Kennedy there. Um, so this feminist or the women's liberation movement, a group of women will actually go to the Miss America beauty pageant in 1968, and basically what they do is they're arguing that the Miss America pageant is pretty much a sham because they say, your judges are essentially men. And so, you're going up there parading around and you're competing for the approval of men, of male judges. And then at the same time, you're creating these standards of how we measure whether or not a woman is beautiful. And of course, they're saying there should be no standard, that every woman is beautiful. And this will get a lot of media attention when these girls show up to picket this thing. And there you can see some of the protesters, the signs. If you want meat, go to the butcher. Okay, um, there is going to be a reaction on the other side to this. And what you're going to see is conservative activists, particularly Phyllis Schlafly, opposing the Equal Rights Amendment. Saying that essentially these women are taking things too far. Um, they could potentially hurt the moderate feminist movement because they're so radical. It could create more resistance against it. And so Phyllis Schlafly is kind of the leader of this, and she becomes a very powerful, influential conservative figure as we go into the 80s. Also, you're going to see abortion become a big battle in this feminist movement. Um, Abortion in most states had been illegal, and abortion at the time was still a fairly dangerous process because of that. And so feminists came out saying that state legislatures should essentially end restrictions on abortion, legalize it, allow proper facilities and physicians to carry these out. And in 1973, you get Roe versus Wade, which, of course, makes abortion legal nationwide. And this bill still generates a lot of opposition. And what you're going to see here is that once the bill is passed, a lot of opposition comes up against this thing. And Congress is going to pass a series of laws to restrict abortion rights. So they'll kind of deny coverage through Medicaid so that a woman getting Medicaid could not use the Medicaid money to have an abortion performed. They'll also try to cut government funding programs. And we're kind of seeing this in terms of synthesis with the Planned Parenthood. A lot of states are kind of voting. I think Virginia today or yesterday actually voted to not deny funding to Planned Parenthood. And so you're seeing states that are still kind of battling with should government funds pay for abortions. Um, but feminists in the 60s and 70s, they make a lot of advances. Um, we talked about a couple things that were included in the civil rights legislation in 68 that provided for equal opportunity employment. You'll also get Title IX of the Education Amendments Act in 72, which banned sexual discrimination in all aspects of education.